Hey there, James with the Pot Smashers crew here, and today I've got a special episode for you. We'll be counting down the top 10 most overrated video games of all time. Or of the week. Or just of what I think at this very moment. Now, since anyone can be a critic, and I don't always like to be negative, just most of the time, I'm gonna balance the bashing by handing you a comparably underrated game for each spot on the list. So, get some things out of the way. The criteria for underrated game is less unit shipped based on my relatively limited and lazy research on sales and, looking at some other media sites. But before we jump in, let's just be clear on a couple things. One, this list is of the utmost seriousness, so if you disagree with me, don't forget to leave a comment explaining exactly how wrong I am about your favorite game, all the games I should have chosen instead, and or just threatening me personally. So, without further ado, let's count them down. Pokemon Puzzle League for the N64. So it's a tile matching game that sold about 360,000 copies. It's a pretty great game. I mean, who doesn't love Pokemon? Well, me, for like the past 8 titles in the series, but that's a whole nother video. The theme of Pokemon trainers battling here works pretty well, and the performance improvements made make a big difference over previous titles. But that's kind of the problem. See, it's just a reskinned version of Tetris Attack, and theme aside with the alternate modes, there's not much new in this go-around, so while the gameplay is more responsive because of the N64's better processing power, it somehow doesn't come off feeling as intense, and at the highest level of competitive play, it's straight up boring, even as tile matching games go. That kind of says something. So, what should you have played instead? Well, at only a quarter of the number of copies sold, the answer is Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo for the Sega Saturn. Don't be fooled by its name, there's no Super Puzzle Fighter number 1, and the gameplay was a completely fresh take on the block-dropping genre other than a couple obscure arcade games. You might laugh at the idea of battling with colored squares, but then you'd be missing all the complexity and depth this title has to offer. Using the well-known characters from the Street Fighter franchise, the game parallels fighting games in more than a couple of ways. Destroying a certain number of blocks sends them to your opponent, and the twist here is each fighter has their own color pattern, and even a percent modifier on the number of blocks they'll respond with. Heck, there's even diamonds, something those familiar with the fighting franchise might compare to supers or ultras, though they don't take crazy button inputs to pull off, and are a great mechanic for keeping both high-level and casual play fun. So while both tend to have equal charm and a familiar, lighthearted presentation, the originality of the Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo combined with the deep competitive spirit makes this a far better option. Limbo, a puzzle platformer for PC and Xbox Live Arcade. This thing sold 900,000 units.
It's over 9,000! What, 9,000?
And with its unique visual appeal and distinct gameplay, it remains one of the most popular Xbox Live Arcade games ever released. The success of this indie title centers around its clever puzzles and atmosphere, which is largely justified. Death is sudden, but the downside is short-lived to prevent frustration. You learn by dying in a multitude of ways, and eventually you overcome each puzzle with a smug self-satisfaction that you solved it. So, why am I listing it? Well, the puzzles aren't succinct, and while you can't blame the controls, succeeding, especially early on, typically involves advancing forward until the game decides to kill you, as a means to teach you a mechanic, or how to pass that particular level. This feels a little cheap in terms of design, and had me putting it down on a couple occasions, because as I completed a puzzle, the feeling of accomplishment was replaced with the knowledge I was about to get jibbed, and there really wasn't a lot I could do about it. It's not even that you shouldn't play Limbo, but if you want a truer puzzle game, is that a word? Truer? You should be playing Braid. At 450,000 units sold, this game is the perfect puzzle game. If you're into game design, you can learn something here, but even if you're not, you can't help but notice the difference. It's tangible. In Braid, you're given the tools up front to solve the problem presented, and the only thing standing between you and success is your brain power. And it will stand between you and success. Also, Braid's presentation is just top-notch. Limbo skirts the issue using the solid black as a hybrid atmospheric gameplay decision, and it kinda works, but Braid's backgrounds alone could be printed and hung on your wall, which makes staring at that one riddle for hours somehow calming, not infuriating. Mortal Kombat 2, an SNES fighting game known for its over-the-top violence and gore, not to mention popular enough to get a movie license. There are so many gamers who happily recall executing their friends to these over-the-top fatalities and its industrial soundtrack. But 25 minutes with this game tells you everything you need to know, and from a design perspective, Mortal Kombat 2 represented no actual improvement within the genre, despite its overwhelming popularity and success. Yeah, it was edgy, and it sold largely because your parents wouldn't want you to have it, but it spawned a lot of controversy over violence in video games, and in the meantime, it wasn't even original or creative. Nothing had evolved. It was just more explicit and gruesome. So, while everyone thought it was fantastic at the time, this game lacks depth, and its flaws manifest themselves in spammy gameplay, yet it still somehow shows up even in bars today. Frankly, I don't get it, but what should you have been playing? Hands down, Street Fighter 2. Yeah, this thing sold like hotcakes too. It's in the billions of dollars of revenue at this point. But while you might have disagreed with my earlier suggestions, if you disagree that Street Fighter 2 was a better game, you would be objectively wrong. I mean, it invented the combo. Even if you don't dig frame data, own fight sticks, or know a particular individual's theme that works for anything, you need to stop and think about that. The combo. What did Mortal Kombat give us? Just fucking watch some of this. A platformer for the Wii U with around 4.6 million copies sold. This is one of the top selling games for the Wii U. It follows a fairly typical Mario formula, and it never strays far from the beaten path. You know how it goes. With the recent Mario titles, the more people playing, the tougher it gets as you awkwardly jump, bounce, firepower, and float over each other and across 9 some odd worlds. I guess there is one fresh item, which is the Toad puzzle houses, and they involve helping the incompetent fun guy. But the experience is single player only. They feel tacked on and generally seem to have been added just to generate interest in the Toad Treasure Tracker title, which was released shortly after. So I could not care less about fairies who are mechanics or plumbers also, and glass stuck in glass bottles and shit. But what should you have played? Rayman, 1 million copies sold. This shit is real. It's co-op, multiplayer mayhem with character. It has tight controls, a no-nonsense approach to, well, nonsense. But it's crisp, fun, silly. It uses the Wii U gamepad. It uses the Wii U gamepad. But seriously, you gotta careen your way through wackiness that feels like it should have been in the Earthworm Jim games. It's a platforming masterpiece. It proves you don't need 3D to look, sound, feel fresh. The art direction is spot on, there's plenty of challenge collectibles, and no clumsy story to slow down the pacing. So while Ubisoft has failed us many times, Uplay, this isn't one of them. The developers and creative team clearly poured their heart and soul into this thing, and it shows. Mario, on the other hand, is held back by tired tropes, wonky camera angles, and did I mention the floaty controls? Not to mention where Rayman gets better with co-op, Mario goes so downhill. It's embarrassing. Mario Party 4 for the GameCube, or anything after it. If I need to explain why Mario Party has sucked for a very long time, you either straight up like bad video games, or you're someone's friend who just doesn't play games. The formula is tired, skill has all but been removed, and mash A as fast as you can provides only a limited amount of entertainment. So while we can still hope one day Nintendo will have the heart to take out the shotgun and put this series down once and for all, until then, I recommend avoiding any combination of the words Mario and Party, because while separated, these terms can spell out a good time. Similar to the words sex and crabs, when you put them together, that's not the case. So, what words should you be combining? Fusion and Frenzy. Yeah, this original Xbox launch title knocked it out of the park. The minigames were fantastic, fun, frantic. They hit the right mix of luck and skill, with anyone able to pick them up in 1 or 2 tries, but that easy to learn, tough to master style of gameplay. They even implemented a betting mechanic for the final round, which works fantastically as a method to catch up players who may be trailing on the other minigames, and it just never got old. Whether you're playing controller, DDR, Battle Snake, Hot Potato with dynamite in an elevator, or sumo balls. Yeah, playing sumo balls. This title's great. The music was catchy, and if I had to criticize anything about it, it would have to only be that Jack soundbite needs to go. Like,
come on, guys, keep up! Candy from a baby. Candy from a baby. Candy from a baby.
seriously, I want to crawl into the screen and strangle him to death.
Yes!
But otherwise, it's one of the best party games ever developed, and I think the only thing that could make it better would be an HD remake. So that concludes part 1 of our top 10 overrated games list. Did you disagree with something I've listed? Noticed a mistake? Or maybe you just have a guess for what might be included in one of those top 5 spots? Well, let me know. Seeing as this is one of the most complex videos I've put together, I'd love to get your feedback in the comments below. And while you're down there, don't forget to click those like and subscribe buttons, because if you don't, then I might never get around to making part 2. So, thanks for watching, and bye!